Hey, what's good? What's good, everybody? What's good, everybody? Want to say welcome back to yet another episode of the Two Young Pastors podcast.
Hmm.
We're your host, myself, Juwan Sanders, and my brother, my co-partner in ministry, Pastor Elijah Stanley, where we talk about ministry, we talk about spirituality, and how it intersects with culture on an everyday basis. You indeed, in this podcast, will indeed have an opportunity to hear what our perspective is on everyday issues that many of us go through. Sometimes we may even talk about our experiences with our churches, our experiences with concepts that take place in ministry, and we've been in like this situation over the past couple episodes where we've been talking about relationships and specifically friendships. If you know friendships, you know that a lot of times many of us have them and many of us want them. Yet the older you get, if we're being honest, a lot of times it seems as though that like the friends that we have, it kind of sort of dwindles.
Mm.
It could be because of life. It could be because of hard things that have happened. But I recognize that these relationships are crucial. It's not just
Yeah.
about family. It's not just about romantic partners, but no, it's about friends. We need friends. God created us for community and companionship, and so we have indeed been talking about some of the more difficult dynamics when it comes to certain relationships, and specifically we've been talking about like breakups and how friendships come to an end. Because if we want to make sure that we maintain the relationships that we have, we need to make sure that we can kind of sort of avoid some of the pitfalls that many individuals find themselves in. And so, last time we met, we actually talked about what it means to cut people off. And so
Mhm.
now, trying to really bring this thing full circle, because we don't just want to talk about the problem just to talk about the problem, but no, we actually want to bring this full circle by talking about the solution. How can we mend? How can we mend relationships?
Right.
Uh, and Elijah, as we were really prepping for this, there was a topic that came up that we said we really wanted to start off with. And it was about understanding that not all relationships can be mended, not all friendships can be mended, and being okay with that, being
Yeah.
okay with it. And I say this because I remember 2020, the winter break of 2020,
Mhm.
going into 2021, bro. I remember telling myself this very same thing that, hey, we can do this. Realizing that friendship does take intentionality, that there are certain aspects that you have to be mindful of, and that you can't just uh, be friendships by with convenience or of convenience, but there takes some time there and takes some intentionality there. And so what ended up happening is I made this realization that, man, not everyone can be friends, and not everyone is supposed to be your friend, and that's okay. That's
Mhm.
okay. But then I got into a situation where it seemed like one of my friendships was actually coming to an end.
Wow.
And even though I kind of sort of mentally prepared myself for the reality that not all friendships can last and will be around, once it got to the point where I was indeed having a friend breakup, uh,
Mm.
and the conversation that took place, the conversation was uncomfortable, but it hit me after it. It hit me after. It was like a ton of bricks. Like, dang, this relationship is dying. It's
Mm.
dying. And even though I told myself, hey, sometimes it's going to happen, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The actual impact of that thing hurt so much. And so, I wanted to talk to you about this. I wanted to ask, like, hey, man, what's your experience with it? What are your thoughts with it? And what can you like share with the people as we begin talking about mending relationships?
Yeah. I can always speak from my perspective, man. And something I've learned over the course of being in pastoral ministry is that I am someone that wants everyone to at least have a good opinion of me.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that I'm a people pleaser. I wouldn't go that far.
yeah,
But I will say that I de- I was definitely someone that was like, hey, like I don't ever want to leave a conversation with someone not liking me, right?
mm, mm,
And that was at the beginning, and then my lead pastor, Doc Peeler, had to like talk to me and kind of mentor me through it and said, hey, you're gonna have some individuals that aren't gonna like you just because your job might be sometimes to just say no, even though that, they're good people, but that idea or that format or whatever it is, you might have to say no, and they're gonna end up leaving that conversation not liking you. And if I was to take that out and put it in a real world, right, there are just gonna be individuals that don't like us.
Yeah.
It might not have anything to do with the things that we say, the things that we wear, how we look, whatever. They might just not like you because of something they might be dealing with, right? So I've had to come to the part of my life now that I'm like, not everyone needs to be my friend,
Hmm.
and not everyone needs to be someone that I go out of my way to um, to not to reconcile with. I wouldn't say that because we're always called to reconcile, right?
Mm.
I would say I wouldn't go out of my way to go back to where we used to be,
Yeah.
because again, we have different stages of friendships that we've been talking about for a while, right? And
Yeah.
if you don't have these different stages of friendships, you'll treat everyone equally. Yo, your lead pastor on this past Sabbath said something crazy. He
Yeah.
said, he said, again, this is a quote from Dr. Frazier. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Jesus treated everyone right, right? But he didn't treat everyone equally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that to me kind of opened up that thought. Is like, hey, we're called to treat everyone right, but we can't treat everyone equally.
Mm.
So if we're treating everyone equally, we are attempted to go into that stage where we're overperforming and we're overdoing some things for individuals that we don't need to treat that way, because they're on the periphery of life,
Yeah.
of our life. And we don't, and to be honest, bro, it's finite.
Yeah.
So if we're giving all our resources equally to everybody,
Certainly.
that's not that's not the way that we're supposed to be doing it. That's We're not called to give equity to all friendships. We're called to
Yeah.
prioritize some,
Yeah.
and allow some to naturally go through their course and die. And that's a tough word for someone that wants everyone to like them. And that's someone I used to be, and I'm growing out of that, bro. Now, does that sound biblical to you?
You said we're called to prioritize some relationships.
Uh-huh.
I don't know which relationships were called
Mhm.
based on the Bible. Like
Yeah.
that, outside of like parents, you need to make sure that you like treat your children well.
Yeah.
Like once you're a parent and you bring life into the world, I think that like those are the only individuals who are called to prioritize.
Yeah.
Any I don't and I don't think that any other human being has a biblical mandate to prioritize a certain type of relationship
Yeah.
outside of parents
Right.
and husbands and wives, parents and husband and wife. Like
Eh,
friends, like we're we're giving guidance on how we like and principles on how we can show up, you
right.
know.
Right.
Uh Yet I don't know if we're necessarily called to prioritize as much as we're called to be.
Mhm.
Um and what I mean by that is we're 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 not called to show like to prove that some individuals are more important to others.
Right.
Like I think we're called to actually present ourselves in a certain way to show that those individuals are valued and
Mhm.
that they're valuable, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that that's the only distinction that I would shift, because I don't want anyone walking away. You know, I don't want anyone walking away saying, "Oh, I'm called based on the Bible to prioritize this relationship," and I'm not, and I don't necessarily have any responsibility for y'all over there. And that's the only thing
Right.
I just want to make sure that we don't
And
do.
and that's why I said, and I gave the baseline, right, is Christ treated everyone equally.
Hmm.
So your idea of to be, we're called to be individuals that
Hmm.
treat everyone equally, regardless of what they mean to us.
Mm,
right? So the stranger, right? The Bible has all these different types of people that we're called to treat equally, right? Because we, in our human nature, have to be reminded by God that it's not always about our family,
mm,
right? That we need to give more attention to, but just treat everyone equally. But there are individuals that are treated right based on who they are to God and who they are to us because of the image of God in them,
mhm,
right? And there are certain individuals, exactly like you said, your spouse, your partner, right? Your children, that the Bible doesn't elevate above, but says that when it comes to making decisions about life,
mm.
you should think about them,
Understood. Okay.
right? And I'm just taking that same principle, that same idea, and saying, hey, we should take that same principle and apply it a little bit to our friendships.
Yeah.
Because there are some individuals, like we said in our last episode, that are seasonal, right? And it would be irresponsible of us to to drag them into the next part of our life when they were really meant to be there for a certain part of our life. Good. What I'm not saying is that once they're out of your life, to completely forget everything they ever did for you,
Mhm, mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying put that in your memory, treat them right, but at one point you have to make the decision to spend some time with certain individuals over others.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in making that decision, we're called to prioritize certain relationships that might be lifelong over ones that might be just a month old, and that's
Yeah.
just only because of finite resources like time. And
Understood.
it's just bringing, like, all right, who are we prioritizing? And especially in the mending process, bro, I believe, and we're talking about repairing damaged friendships, right?
Yeah.
And how do we start that mending process?
Okay.
It's figuring out, is this relationship, like, what is my value in this relationship? We're never called to leave anyone in the dark about why something ended, but when you're talking and starting about the mending process, is figuring out, what does this relationship mean to you? And I think that kind of
Well,
helps figure out what that end goal is.
y you know, I'll say this. I don't really know as much as if it's as much of a "What does this relationship mean to me?"
Mhm.
type situation, as much as a "What's my responsibility as a child of God?"
Mm,
'Cause there's a difference between what does this relationship mean to me and what's my responsibility,
mhm,
um, because you can come up with 2 different things.
mhm,
Because many individuals, if you had a bad ending in a certain relationship, if a person did something that you did not like, uh, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to mean as much to you anymore. You know what I'm
right,
saying? Like
right,
the relationship gets put on ice, like things shift, and you um, push down that relationship in terms of the tiers of your life. And so at times you're gonna be like, it don't really mean much to me. I got other people, more other individuals are more important.
mhm,
And we'll tell ourselves other people are more important. But I think like what's interesting that we have to do is say, well, as a believer, how do I show up here? You know, like how does a believer who is trying to like be a healthy believer, but also just like a healthy human being, like how does he or she show up right here and right now? You know, if we're
that's
talking
good.
about trying to mend and rebuild certain relationships,
Mhm,
right? Um, I would also say you have to be able to assess the ability to rekindle and to rebuild a relationship, because just because a relationship and a person means something to you, it does not necessarily mean that rebuilding the relationship is possible. Okay,
Mm,
like just because I want to be able to do it, it doesn't mean that one, I'm in a space to actually rebuild. It doesn't mean that the other person is in a space to actually rebuild the relationship. The relationship may mean so much to me, yet that person could still be toxic. That
mm,
person could still be unchanged, and so could I. And so just I may have the desire to build it, yet there are certain things that you have to check. There are certain things that you got to check first. You got to check, well, what's my responsibility here? Then you got to check what's the ability, what's the ability of this relationship, or the possibility of this relationship actually coming back to life,
mm,
right? And then I would say that you kind of sort of need to understand what the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, right?
mm,
That's because I think if you don't understand these things, you'll end up going back to people over and over and over again
mm,
who don't deserve you. Or you'll keep going to people and looking for forgiveness and looking for second and third and fourth and fifth chances. And the truth is that either they are a black hole or you are a black hole.
mm.
And not all individuals know how to be able to handle that black hole. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I recognize that in addition to asking the question, how much does this relationship mean to me? How much does this person mean to me? You got to also ask yourself, well, what's my responsibility as a believer? What's my
that's the
responsibility
first step.
yeah,
Yeah.
like what's my responsibility? Because you know, like Jesus was asked, how many times should I forgive? And the person said, all right, 70 times seven,
Hmm.
right? And that was not necessarily meant to be like a, hey, count on your hands how many times you're supposed to forgive, but it was meant to show like, hey, you're supposed to forgive an infinite amount of times.
Hmm.
Yet the question really begins to come into fruition of, well, what's forgiveness versus reconciliation?
Hmm.
Because when you dive into the what's forgiveness versus what does it mean to reconcile, you then dive into the question of, well, how possible is it for this relationship to actually be rekindled for
Right.
right now? And so, I want
Right.
to ask you, bro, what's forgiveness for you? How do you define forgiveness?
Forgiveness starts, man, really, and I love how one of the scriptures that I was talking through it was Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, where it's talking about, and it's putting forgiveness in the context of what Christ has done. So it just actually says like, be kind and be compassionate, and forgiving each other, and the qualifier is just as Christ forgave you.
Yeah,
And what it's doing is it's qualifying forgiveness, and it's giving the attitude of forgiveness, which is being kind and compassionate.
yeah,
And following the qualifier of what that looks like is saying, where does forgiveness start? It starts with not always the transgressor, but sometimes the victim,
mm,
right? And not even sometimes. I'm gonna take that back.
yeah,
It starts on either side. The qualifier being the believer. So it starts with the believer,
mm,
and the attitude that forgiveness has is it's a forgiveness of being kind and compassionate. And it's hard to really think about it in that way, bro, because if you're a victim of of friendship, and the perpetrator is your friend that has said something, that has expressed something about you, it's hard to be kind and compassionate in forgiveness. And sometimes as believers, as believers in Christ, right, we'll forgive someone, but we'll do it like, man, I don't want to forgive them. But I don't want to forgive them. I want to forgive them. So I'm going to forgive them because that's what God asked me to. But in my heart, I really don't want to forgive them, right?
yeah,
And that's as as easy as it is to say.
yeah,
In practice, it's hard to be kind and compassionate in your forgiving.
mm,
That attitude is hard to have, but that's where the qualifier is so important is that God was the ultimate uh, person
Yeah.
that had the full obligation
Yeah.
and would be justified in not forgiving us.
Yes.
And then yet he went out of his way and with the attitude of kindness and compassion
Yeah.
forgave us. So when you ask like what is forgiveness, you can forgive somebody but have the wrong attitude.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And then because of the wrong attitude, the effects of forgiveness are never fully felt
Mm-hmm.
because the effect of forgiveness is peace on the victim,
Yeah.
right? It has as much to do on the victim as it has to do on the as giving consequences
To the
for
purpose.
right. So if the if the person doing the forgiveness isn't doing it with the right attitude, you're not gonna feel that peace.
Yeah.
You're not gonna feel that weight of hey, like I don't have to allow this to be a burden on my life anymore. Now, that doesn't take away the trauma, right, of what you're going through, but what it does is it no longer factors into the decision making as much as it used to,
That's good.
so that your self-esteem is not where it was when you're feeling that burden. It
Yeah.
doesn't bear on the relationships you're trying to form afterwards.
Yeah.
It's freeing if it's done in the right attitude. If it's done in the wrong attitude, that's where some of it the effects of forgiveness are lost. So I love the way that Ephesians qualifies it in it. So, but what's yours, man? What is forgiveness and how would you tie it?
Yeah, man. So, like, what's interesting is that in grad school at Andrews, I took a Christian social ethics course. Probably one of the more difficult classes I've taken in my entire life because I had a
Mm,
teacher, German, Dr. Jurancic. Okay, and it was good because it really challenged our understanding on these concepts, because it was really a philosophical class. Like
mm,
whenever you talk about ethics, you're talking about philosophies, okay? And what like the in the class, there was so much disagreement because we had kind of sort of based our understanding of forgiveness on what we really saw on TV or what we saw pastors say, where we say,
yeah.
"Hey, you need to forgive for yourself. You need to forgive. Forgiveness helps you as well." And so, like a lot of us, we really made forgiveness about us,
Mhm,
right? But as I was like beginning to process through what Dr. Yaronchich was like posing to us, and as I was thinking about like, well, what does God do? Like how does God reflect forgiveness? Because if all these things start with him, and if forgiveness is an aspect of grace, which is an aspect of love, if forgiveness is an aspect of not only grace but also mercy, which means it stems from love and means that it must stem from God.
mhm,
So if I'm going to understand forgiveness, I have to understand how God displays forgiveness. And what I understand about forgiveness from God's lens is that forgiveness doesn't necessarily like do anything. It is not about you as the individual,
right.
right? Not saying that you as the individual do not have benefits of forgiving, right? Because like you'll feel it in your body that you feel easier, that it's peace, that you can focus better, but really it is like that. It's providing a clean slate to the individual who has done you wrong.
Mhm,
Okay. That's what forgiveness really is. It is offering a clean slate. It is offering uh, um, grace and humanization to the individual who has done you wrong. But here is the caveat: forgiveness is only necessary to be given to individuals who have identified that they have done something wrong. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to say that
yeah.
again, bro.
Say it one more time.
Forgiveness is not something that you have to give to everyone.
Mhm,
It's something that you can offer to everyone, but it's not something that you have to give to everyone, because forgiveness is truly only for the person who acknowledges that they have done something wrong and are in need of your forgiveness.
mm,
You don't have to forgive a person who does not acknowledge that they did something wrong to you. You don't have to acknowledge and forgive an individual who thinks that they were right in the situation.
Mm.
You offer forgiveness to an individual who recognizes that they've done something wrong, and they feel guilty, sometimes shameful about what they have done to you.
Mhm.
That's who you offer forgiveness to.
Mm.
The reason why God is so willing to offer forgiveness to us as believers is because somewhere along the way, we recognize, oh, I've done something offensive against God.
Mhm.
And we're able to admit that we did something offensive against God.
Mhm.
But you can't forgive a person. Like, a person can't like embrace and receive forgiveness if they don't actually think that they did anything wrong.
Mm. That's
And
good.
so there's a difference between being able to forgive and being in a position where you're ready to forgive versus actually forgiving, offering forgiveness to the person,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
So you would say that we as believers are called to offer forgiveness. We're called to offer forgiveness
Yeah.
to those that are willing to accept.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like God already offers, he offers it to the individuals
Mhm.
who need it,
Mhm.
because the individual who needs the forgiveness is not the person who's the victim. It's the person who is the perpetrator.
Mhm.
It's that individual,
Mhm.
because like the way that we talked about it in our class is that forgive, it's something that you give to someone else. And the reason why you give it is because typically, if we go according to the Matthew 18 model, where you tell a person, I offended you in this way, right? The natural response, if a person cares about you and is willing to be empathetic towards your situation, is
Mhm.
they should feel guilty that they have caused some form of negative impact on your life. They should feel bad. Like, if I hear that, like, if I hear that a comment that I said about Leah hurt you in some way, harmed you in some way, right? Even
Mhm.
if I didn't necessarily intend it, like, because I care about you, I should be willing to, like, it should cause me to be moved and be like, dang, that, like, I feel bad.
Yeah.
And so, because I'm receiving that what I did caused harm to you, possibly to Leah, because you possibly shared it, I feel guilty, and I ask, hey, can you forgive me?
Mm.
And you and forgiveness is something that you offer when you are ready. You say, hey, you're forgiven. You're forgiven.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's something that you offer, and here's the biggest thing. In order to offer forgiveness, no matter what, you need to find resolution.
Mhm.
You need to be resolved. And so, no matter what, if you want to be able to forgive a person, if you want to be in a position where you can extend forgiveness to an individual who has done you wrong or who has done someone else wrong, no matter what, you need to get over it. You need to resolve. You need to be able to say, I've moved on. I have closure on this. This no longer negative. I'm not going to allow this to negatively impact me. I am resolved. I have resolution. I have closure on this thing.
Mhm.
You need resolution more than anything else, because resolution is what helps you to have a countenance of forgiveness.
Mhm.
That's what you need, from my understanding.
Yeah.
And so forgiveness is not something that can always be obtained in a situation, because even though an individual has resolution, even though they've resolved in themselves that they're okay, that they're moving on, sometimes the individual on the other side does not understand nor take responsibility for how they contributed to an issue. And so, just because just because you are ready to extend
Yeah.
forgiveness,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone can be forgiven.
So you're saying forgiveness is a two-step process,
It-
right? Right. Right.
yeah,
It's the person offering forgiveness, but it has to be accepted on the other side for the process to be complete.
yes, yes. So God, I'm sure that God is ready to forgive any sinner, right? Because God knows things that we don't know.
Hmm.
God understands things that we don't understand. And he's able to be empathetic. And he has moved, God has moved on. The Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, they've moved on, right? Even the Bible says, like, hey, there are things, there are actions that we have, like God throws it out, casts it to the bottom of the ocean, right?
Hmm.
Essentially, he is ready to treat you as though it was never done.
Right.
Yet, in order for it to truly be embraced from your side, you actually have to be able to say, I did this. I
Hmm.
did something wrong, which is the reason why there are several individuals who will go to hell, who will burn in hell. And the reason why they're burning is because they have not received forgiveness
Hmm.
that was extended by God.
Hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a it's not a because what what pops up in my mind, right? When people talk about the Christian duty to forgive is like those clips of families in court, and they're standing in front of the person that killed their like family member. They're like, "Hey, I forgive you," and the families applauded because they're like, "This is what a believer is supposed to do: forgive, everyone that has transgressed them." It it's a great video, and it's a great um
That's a little performative, to be honest.
right. They're like, "Hey, like I'm forgiving you for killing my daughter," and like they're all over the internet, right? Of like, "Hey, this is what it's supposed to be. Need to forgive." You're saying it's a great offering that they're doing, but really it's incomplete if the person on the other side is like, "I don't acknowledge what I did at all."
Yes. In addition, I would say those videos are extremely harmful.
Mm.
And the reason why they're harmful is because of the fact that, or they can be harmful. They can be harmful because there will be some individuals who will use it and say, hey, this is how it's supposed to be done. Some of you are holding on to things, and you see these people, they can do it. They're individuals whose family members were killed. And if they can do it and their family was killed, then you should be able to forgive too.
Right.
And the problem with that is that, one, we don't know if that person, like, actually, we don't know how much that person, we don't know that person.
There's a lot of things we don't know about, like what
Like,
happened. Yeah.
like, because I don't want to say we don't know if the person actually forgave. Like, I'm a person that I take your word for it. Unless you give me a reason not to, I'll take your word for it. But the easiest thing to say is we don't know their life. In addition, it's them. Everyone's forgiveness process is different, right? Everyone's forgiveness process is different.
Mhm.
And I also just want to say, just because you forgive, it doesn't mean that you forget what they actually did to you. Like, I know there are a lot of preachers who got popular off of saying forgive and forget. Like, treat the person as though it did not happen. No, that's not that's no, that's not the no. Like, you don't forget what happened to you. Like, the reason why God, what, like, they misinterpret what the Bible says. It says that when God forgives us, really, he treats us as though what we did had never happened. It didn't say he forgets what we did. It's just saying that he's so gracious that he treats us as though we hadn't done it. But also, God knows exactly who we are.
Mhm.
Like, before we committed the sin, before we committed the offense, God knew we were going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different for God, in my humble opinion. In my humble
Mhm.
opinion. But I just want to say that those videos indeed can be harmful.
Mhm.
I think if we're talking about what are some prerequisites or what are some things that we need to do in order to like mend relationships, we first have to be resolved within ourselves, bro.
Mm.
Like we have to have resolution for within ourselves.
Mhm.
Like you can't go extending forgiveness to another person if you are not ready. Like if you are not willing to move on,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And last thing I no, I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna save it. And I'm gonna save it. I know I just talked a lot. And so like that's what I think of when I think of forgiveness.
Mhm.
Like and so with that, I know I just talked. I'm gonna ask you a question, right? Because I want to ask, like, is forgiveness equal to going back into that relationship?
Man, this is where the church gets in a lot of trouble, bro.
Okay.
So, we all hear, stories about scandals and things like this happening in church, right? Where a certain person might have had, authority over something and they ended up doing something with somebody. Like I've heard countless stories of like youth pastors, right?
Yeah.
That have decided to abuse their authority, right? With individuals within their group. And it would be crazy for us as administrators of a church to say forgiveness in every single aspect of our life means that that person is then treated and allowed to go back and have the same relationship with the organization that they had before they were they were caught uh, doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And in the same vein, right, we take steps to prevent that person from ever being in that position again. And then we even go above and beyond, hopefully, right, in following the legal matter and making sure that it's resolved in a legal sense as well. Like we as a church sometimes get in trouble because we think we take grace and then we confuse grace with allowing that person not to deal with the consequences of what they did,
That's good.
right? Right. There's grace that God offers us,
Yeah.
and that grace means that the end goal of where God wants you to go, right? The destination remains with him,
Yeah.
right? But the consequences of the actions and what you did sometimes are life are dealing with it lifelong.
Mm,
And we're talking about David, we're talking about everything else, right? So we're talking about, is forgiveness, are we looking at forgiveness through rose-colored glasses, right? Where we're forgetting that light has different like
yeah.
intensities. And sometimes that intensity is living with the consequences of your actions, but the destination of where you're trying to get to with God remains the same.
Mhm.
And forgiveness and healing doesn't mean that the relationship has to go back to the same level of intimacy it had before, especially when we look at the way that our church deals with scandals like that. If you're a pastor and you've been caught messing with finances, you should never have a church debit card or a church card again, in my opinion,
Yeah.
right? You should have someone else deal with all of that and then put in proper places. And even in that, I don't think you should ever be the lead in an organization again, because it would be super restrictive not to have the lead pastor dealing with the finances with the treasurer. So like if we deal with that on a on a institutional level,
Yeah.
right? It would be irresponsible of us to say that even in our personal relationships, we
That's good.
don't put those barriers and markers as well, because we criticize institutions for not putting up those barriers when individuals have clearly transgressed,
Yeah.
right? If your friend has shown the ability to misuse information you have shared with them, it would be irresponsible of you as an individual
Yeah.
to allow them to have the same level of access to your information. Again, I feel like that's that's pretty common knowledge. And then people look at at Christ as an example, bro, of saying, well, he allowed his disciples back into the fold, afterwards, after, Peter denied him and da, 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 right?
Mhm.
Yeah, he did. But there was a process that
Yeah.
they went through. They had to follow the instructions that he gave to then allow them to continue on in the journey. They were in the upper room praying earnestly, right? When Christ offered Peter the ability to come back, man, right? Like
No, he offered before that.
yeah. So he offered it before, but the power that came and fell on the upper room,
Mhm.
right, was because they followed the instructions. So the offer was always given. That
Mhm.
offer for coming back was given. Peter accepted it,
Yeah.
right, and he came back, and then he had to stay in that upper room, getting in the right mindset with everybody else, and then the spirit fell. So
Yes.
it's this idea of it's it's a process, but it doesn't always mean that that person then has the same level of access to you just because forgiveness has been offered, they've accepted it. In a world of sin, the ideal should always be going back to where it's supposed to go back with your relationship.
Yes.
I don't think we've ever changed that, right? That's always the ideal is for it to go back
If possible.
if possible, but then recognizing that we as humans, it's always appropriate for
Yeah.
us, not for that person to have to earn back,
Yeah.
but that person to then you allow yourself that opportunity to give back trust as you feel uh, you're you're able to.
I love that, and see, I love it because it is, bro. I think we were getting into it earlier, right? But I think one of the things that people get wrong about like healing broken relationships and like recovering from forgiveness, and we started talking about it earlier, is that there really is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation.
Mhm,
Okay, these things are not synonymous, right? Like I said before, we have to clarify what forgiveness is all about. That forgiveness is not the same thing as resolution, right? Forgiveness is a process that requires two people, right? Resolution only requires you, which is why a person can get over something even if the other person never admits that something is wrong, right?
mhm,
Forgiveness requires two people, which means that reconciliation also requires two people. And here's the thing, I think, biblically speaking, what God does for us is that God says, believers, Christians, once again, you should have a willingness, the ability to reconcile. He doesn't say reconcile,
mm,
as because once again, it's a two-way street. Just because I'm in a position where I'm able to enter into relationship with a person who has done something wrong, it doesn't mean that the other person is. And so they could not be because they just don't want that relationship anymore.
mhm,
It could also not be possible because they have not learned the lessons. They have not grown. Possibly they have gotten worse. They've gotten
mm,
worse.
yeah.
And so just because I have the ability to reconcile, it does not always mean that reconciliation is the answer for this time. For
Mhm,
this time.
mhm.
And see, this is a lesson, bro, that I had to learn the hard way. Cause like I remember, bro, I was preaching this thing at a church one time. I was talking about forgiveness. I was like fresh on a breakup, bro.
Mm.
And I was the offender.
Oh,
And
no.
like I was like, listen, forgiveness means not just forgiving what the person did, but it also means being like it also means that you go back into relationship with that person. Like, and that's what I preach. I was like, listen, God did it in scripture with us. Like when Adam and Eve sinned, he went back into relationship with them. He came to them in the garden, even though they did him wrong. And
Mhm,
see, what I didn't understand is that there was more context there. There was a whole lot more nuance.
Yeah.
because what God extended to Adam and Eve was an opportunity at reconciliation.
Hmm.
The reality is that even though God came to them, because God did forgive,
Hmm.
right? That whole situation is an example of conflict resolution. They
Mm.
did something wrong. And so the reality is that initially Adam nor Eve acknowledged that they had done something wrong against God.
Yeah.
They didn't even acknowledge it. And so technically, God didn't have to forgive in that moment. They didn't have
Mm.
to forgive. He didn't have to forgive. Um, but he was willing to. He was
Hmm.
willing to. And so what we find is that what Christ offered was an opportunity at reconciliation.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey, you all have broken the this covenant or this agreement that we've had in this relationship, right? You went and you ate this tree, you ate the fruit from this tree, and not on and on top of that, y'all not even being honest about it. Like you blaming this person and you blaming that person, but you still ate it.
Mm.
And so what we find is that before sin, there was like this closeness, this intimacy that they had with God. Yet, even in reconciliation, and this was God taking a chance on humanity, what we find is that there was still some separation,
Hmm.
right? The relationship was not as intimate, like you said, it was not as intimate and not as intense as
Mm.
it once was.
Mm.
Not because God didn't feel that way for Adam and Eve and for humanity, because God loved and he still loves Adam and Eve, he loves humanity. Yet, he wasn't willing, he wasn't allowing himself to be exposed as he once was before.
That's true.
Because, like you said, exposure essentially and disclosure is a product of trust.
Hmm.
And because they had broken the trust, God offered a way back, a way to reconcile.
Hmm.
Yet, even in the reconciliation process that he offered Adam and Eve, and that's offered to each and every single one of us, there is still a sense of separation.
Hmm.
We're not able to experience God in his fullness and the way that Adam and Eve were able to before sin.
Hmm.
And we won't be able to experience God in his fullness unless we do our time and we do our work to prove and show that we really are serious about reconciling with God and rekindling that relationship.
Yeah.
And so I recognize that there is a difference. Just because you forgive a person, it does not necessarily mean that reconciliation has to happen.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that rebuilding that relationship has to happen.
Hmm.
There could be individuals who murdered people, and that could be your line. Like, hey, I love you, but I gotta love you from over here.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta love you from over here.
Yeah.
And so the the reconciliation that we can have is I love you from this far,
Hmm.
but there's not gonna be any more, hey, buddy, we going to the corner store to pick up our chips because I can't trust you like that right now.
Yeah.
And where God can do those types of things because he's the God of the universe and he created us, I'm not a creator.
Mm.
Try Jesus. Don't try me. I know him. And so
That's crazy.
I think that so many of us have to really understand these different terms,
Yeah.
because there are different implications for each term. There's a difference between resolution and forgiveness, and there's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. They are all three concepts, all three actions that are very important,
Yeah.
for many individuals. Yet, depending on the situation, depending on the ability to rebuild, some people may just have to settle for resolving. Some people
Mm.
may have to settle for forgiving, and
Hmm.
some people have the opportunity for reconciliation. But
Yeah.
even how much you're able to reconcile is tied to how much individuals are willing to grow and be
Yeah.
better versions of themselves. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that, bro.
So like what we're talking about, right, is like what essentially people get wrong about healing in broken relationships,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
There are some things we're called to do, but sometimes we push the limit and we go above and beyond uh,
mhm,
when when we have to realize that we live in a context of a world that is not perfect,
that is
right?
sinful.
That is sinful, and we're living. But what I had to talk through with someone is that the kingdom is here and it is still to come, right? We're
Yeah,
living in that tension. And in that tension, we're trying to figure out all these different heavenly values and principles in a world of sin and figuring out the best way to apply them, being true to what God is asking us to do, right? And then applying it knowing that I'm sinful and you're sinful,
yes,
right? And protecting our 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 integrity of what God has called us to do, and then realizing that not everyone is approaching it with the right integrity and the right level of sincerity as well,
yes.
and protecting ourselves and our families and our relationships as well, man. So we talked about the extent of forgiveness. It's a two-way street. What some other areas or some other ideas about healing broken relationships that
Mhm.
we might get wrong, bro? Like what are some other?
Good question. Good question. Listen, I want to say this, and I think it's so crucial. Um, Forgiveness can take years, right? It could take years. Because forgiveness is not just this logical thing that can happen.
Mhm.
We're emotional beings. God created us to be emotional beings, right? That's a very human thing.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, not all human things are fleshly things, if that makes sense. I hope that
Mm,
makes sense,
mhm,
right? There, and for the people it may not make sense to, I want to differentiate. Um, Flesh is correlated to sin, right? There are certain things that are just humane. When God created humans, there are certain realities that came attached with us being human. So a person crying is not flesh. A person crying is humane. That's
mhm,
how God created us.
mhm,
And so I say this because um, it is very human for us to take time to get over certain things, especially depending on the offense that was committed. Not all offenses are created equal.
yeah.
There are some offenses that are just thousands upon thousands times worse than other offenses.
Mhm,
And so it's crucial that we understand that forgiveness, like you forgiving a person, can take a long time, right? In addition, just because you make the decision to forgive, it does not mean that the hurt feelings are going to go away.
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Like, your willingness to forgive does not equate to I no longer have any problem with this person whatsoever, right? Forgiveness means that you are giving grace to an individual.
Mhm,
It means that you will not look at that person as though that all they are is the murderer. You will
mm,
not look at that person as though that all they are is the liar, the cheater, the thief, the disrespecter. That is what forgiveness on a most basic level, that is what it means. That you are telling that person, "Hey, there is more to you than this action that you
yeah.
have done." Okay? Cuz that's what forgiveness is for.
Mhm,
Forgiveness is for you humanizing that person again who feels guilty. Because, like I said before, they should feel guilty over what they've done. And typically, because of sin and shame, what will oftentimes happen is that we won't just feel guilty, but we'll feel shame about it.
mhm,
Where it goes past the understanding of what I did was wrong. Because guilt is the understanding that, hey, the action that I just committed, the decision that I just made, that was wrong.
Yeah.
Shame, on the other hand, is I'm wrong. I'm bad.
Mhm.
I'm not good, right? And what happens a lot of times, especially in the society that we live, because we don't have a society that is restorative.
Mhm.
A lot of times, once an individual does that thing, they are forever marked as that thing.
Mhm.
And so a person is always marked as a gospeler. A
Yeah.
person is always marked as a liar. A
Yeah.
person is always marked as a cheater. A person is always marked as a thief, as a murderer. All these things. And here's the thing, all those things are indeed bad.
Mhm.
Yet, the same way that God offers his grace and says, hey, that action that you committed, that does not sum up your entire existence.
Mhm.
And so forgiveness is like that light at the end of the tunnel, especially for the person who may think that, man, like I'm not worth anything.
Yeah.
I'm not human. I'm worse than everyone around me. It's for the individual to realize that, like, no, 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 yeah, you lied, but like you're a sinner.
Mhm.
Like just work so that you don't get into situations like this again.
Right.
You are bigger than this.
Mhm.
Like God has created you for more than this.
Mhm.
And so it's needing to understand that, yes, forgiveness indeed, because um not all issues are created the same, because some individuals will need to be reminded, yeah, you're human,
Yeah.
and even you are worthy of forgiveness,
Yeah.
right? You may not deserve it, but you are worthy of it.
Mhm.
And God determined that when he came and died for you on the cross,
Right. Right.
right? And even though some people may not see it, there can be some individuals who will see you as worthy enough
Mhm.
to take a chance on, and to remind you that you are human, and that what you did, even though it was bad, it was not so bad that we have to ostracize you from everyone. The only person who can make that decision is the individual that created you.
Mhm.
And if God didn't do it, that means that I can't do it either.
Right. Right.
And so I'll say that. But then I'll also say that because forgiveness takes a process, because it takes time, you can still get upset at what a person did.
Mhm.
You have that right. You have that right.
Right to be upset.
You can and you will be upset by what a person did. You can make up in your mind that you're forgiving an individual and that you are moving on. And then there will be certain things that happen in your life that will remind you of what individuals did.
Mm.
Like my father abandoned my family, and whenever I see something equivalent to that in a movie, whenever I see something like that in life, or whenever at times even when I see good dads have good relationships with their children, it will make me think about that,
Mhm.
and I will be angry.
Mm.
That's human.
It is. Yeah.
But what forgiveness is about is not that, hey, you will no longer feel any type of way about what a person did. It's the reality, and it is the ability to not treat them the way that you could treat them. It's to treat them with mercy even though they don't deserve it.
Mhm.
To offer grace even though they didn't earn it. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And so forgiveness takes time. And learning how to function in forgiveness takes an extremely long time to learn.
Yeah. That's true.
And so that's like some of my that was a lot. I know it's a lot, but I'm a lot more passionate about this topic than I realized.
Yeah. I was I was taking it all in, bro. I was like, all right, go ahead.
And so that's what I'll say. That's what I'll say. But what do you what would you add on to that, bro?
Man, the last part that I would just invite everyone to consider is that forgiveness, maybe a biblical misconception or a biblical misunderstanding about forgiveness is that it has to start the other way around. If you're a believer, you're not waiting for the other person to realize they're wrong before you offer forgiveness, right? It starts with your offering. of of giving them forgiveness and then giving them the ability to reject it or to accept it. I think when we're called to be a reconciler, right, is you start the process. We started off this episode, right, talking about that, is that one of the responsibilities of us as believers is being the one to start off this process, and not waiting for the other person. So a part of it is having to bring down your ego, and still processing through the pain, not having to let go of the intensity of the trauma and the pain, but being a believer means that we're held to a higher standard. And a part of that higher standard is, even in your pain, even in your discomfort, being the person to start off the conversation towards the path, and starting off this process is just the last thing I'd add on when it talks about what does the mending process look like.
Yeah.
Maybe a biblical misconception someone might have is, I have to wait on the other person to start off the process. It it begins with a believer, and that's the part of the high standard that we have that's a little bit uncomfortable
Yeah.
to talk about. That's just the last part I'd add, because I think we've walked through it a lot, and we would love to hear what what you at home, uh, as you're listening and processing through it, bro. Next episode, man. I just thought about this. We gotta talk about Lilo and Stitch next episode, bro. Uh,
Lilo and Stitch is crazy, bro. I
like
want to see that movie.
I watched this past Saturday night.
You did?
Um, yeah. Leah took us. Leah took me.
And our family?
And like Benny and Jacob and Danelle, to a drive-in movie theater. You know, it's crazy that she didn't text you. I'm gonna ask her about that.
I actually don't have Leah's number.
Do you have Leah's number?
No.
All right, I'm a text you her number. Cause she for like my birthday surprise, I guess. We went to a drive-in theater.
I didn't make it to the club yet. You know, like we're both brown,
That's
but
insane.
I'm just a couple of shades darker. You know
That's
what I'm saying?
insane. That's insane. That's insane. I literally just thought about that. And I was like, why did it? She's. I'll make sure I follow up on that. But we watched. We watched Lilo and Stitch, bro. It was a part of like a 4 movie showing, and I I have some problems that I need to talk about, and
I need to go see the movie. Okay, I need to go see the movie.
you
Like,
should go watch it, and we should talk about it because I have some real issues with it. Um,
ooh, okay.
I have some, I have some real in depth like cultural issues with it too, bro. Like
What? Okay,
I have
okay.
some,
Understood.
but that's just like a little teaser for our next episode, maybe. We appreciate everyone tuning in. This was probably a heartfelt episode. We want you to make sure that if you're watching, this encourages you, but also challenges you. What are some healing moments you've had to go through, process through? Are there any relationships? What are some insights you have? We would love to talk about it as a community. We want to build that, so please share it with us.
Yes.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Two Young Pastors podcast. We love y'all. As we grow, we would love to grow with you. Juwan, any last words before we tune out?
And man, we really look forward to seeing you next time. Please, please, please share it with someone if you found it good. And you know I at least offered some really challenging takes on what forgiveness is.
Mm,
And so if you disagree, please uh share with us what your thoughts are on it. And you can also email us. Okay.
mhm.
You can email us at two young pastors, the number two young pastors at gmail.com, so that we can respond to it and so that we can have a dialogue on it. We really want to. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, y'all have a good day. Closes out, Doc.
See y'all. See y'all on the next episode of the Two Young Pastors podcast, y'all.